Previously, we had a nor'easter on the east coast and a rare SoCal low pressure system that brought urban flooding and Sierra Nevada snow, both pretty unusual for October. I actually intended to cover both of these, but between life and technical difficulties, I didn't get the chance to. Now, that same trough that originated from the California low is poised to create some potentially severe weather over the Ark La Tex region going into this weekend. Hey, my name is Eric. I am an aspiring meteorologist working my way towards my atmospheric science degree, and I am back after not having uploaded in a bit. We're going to get into this pretty interesting stuff happening in the atmosphere, but I just want to take a second to say, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, consider subscribing and leave a like if you end up finding this video useful. I'd really appreciate it. Most importantly, also before we start, I just want to say for people living in the Great Plains of the US as well as around Arkansas and the states surrounding that, I just want to let you know that there is an increasing risk of severe weather, and it is important that you keep an eye on it because we are seeing potential for tornadoes. Not set in stone yet. Either way, without tornadoes or not, supercell development is looking more likely. So I just want to get the word out there so people can be aware and stay safe. A strong upper level trough that dipped unusually far into the southwestern United States is now moving through the plains. This trough originated from that low that moved through California earlier in the week, which is actually an uncommon setup caused by a split jet pattern. The jet stream is looping further south than normal, allowing for warm, moist air from the Gulf to lift northward, as well as upper-level divergence in the plains. That's why we're seeing low pressure and convection organizing across the central U.S., setting the stage for what's to happen this weekend. Presently, this system is moving through the plains, as I said, and it's causing marginal convective outlooks for those areas, and that's just today especially concentrated over Nebraska and Kansas and even parts of eastern Colorado. This will continue to move into the Central Plains and cause a marginal risk in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. There is also a little bit of activity here in southeast Texas due to a small perturbance with the jet streak. And then as we move into October 18th, which is actually my birthday, so maybe I'll get to storm chase for my birthday. I don't know, that'd be kind of cool. The SPC has initiated a slight risk for severe thunderstorms over the Ark La Tex region. This is unusual for October, but it's not unheard of during transition months. But usually it's during winter to spring that you see more of tornado activity just because of the transfer of heat and cold air. Looking at the forecast for Cape, you can see in that region the brighter areas go over Arkansas. For those of you who don't know, the brighter colors, the more fuel there is for storms. Those light purple into more pinkish orange colors represent about 1,500 to 2,400 joules per kilogram. For supercells to form, you usually need about 1,500, and tornadoes usually form somewhere at least between 1,500 to 2,000. You can see in some concentrated areas we're pretty high up there, and some of this even dips into Texas outside of the highlighted region. You can also see as we go through that event, helicity picks up, which is another important factor for tornadoes and supercells. Helicity is the amount of spin that's in the atmosphere. The moist east sector flow will clash with the drier continental air, a classic fall setup. Moisture return is underway in the deep south, and dew points will return to the upper 60s in parts of Louisiana and Texas. So this, in combination with the other factors, you can expect wind, damaging hail, and possibly tornadoes with this severe threat. So today here in southeast Texas, I've noticed the return of humidity and heat after a stretch of more comfortable conditions here in early October. I walked outside just earlier and I noticed that, and going more into this afternoon, I noticed that the wind was picking up and the clouds were thickening. These are leading signs of moisture return ahead of this approaching system from the north. For some reason, to me, the wind is always nice. I like it when it's not completely still. Most of the time I prefer it that way, especially if it's humid. That'll help kind of mitigate the heat that comes from the humidity. But I was just outside earlier, and despite the humidity, you can still tell that it's fall. Fortunately, here in Texas, we get grateful if we can even get, 60-degree evenings. So, which we haven't, that usually doesn't get into 60 degrees lately until like early morning. But it is just unusually warm right now. It would actually be cooler right now if it weren't for what we're experiencing. And that actually leads me into my next point. This is the bigger picture, and this is the transition between El Nino conditions and what is forecast to be a weak La Nina going into 2026. During transitions like this, the atmosphere lags behind oceanic changes, meaning the jet stream and global circulation patterns still carry momentum, you could say, from the previous phase. That's why we're seeing these odd juxtapositions. You have the warm and dry conditions in the eastern United States, the weird low that occurred over California the other day, and the cooler weather there, and increasingly cooler and wetter weather in the Pacific Northwest. Essentially, the atmosphere is in a tug of war between El Nino's fading influence and La Nina's emerging one, and it is expected to be a weak La Nina, but it can still have a pretty considerable effect on our winter. That is actually why here in Southeast Texas, it was likely why it was dry for a little bit, and now we're seeing the return of that moisture, but it's going to increasingly be more relatively dry, as well as hot here throughout the winter. Now, this does have an effect on the rest of hurricane season that we have to go through, and I will actually explain that in a more detailed video for that, which will probably be next. But to go ahead and summarize that pattern real quick in this video, El Nino tends to favor stronger subtropical jet in the southern U.S. and thus wetter and cooler conditions in the south. The La Nina shifts that, and the jet stream retreats northward, and you see drier conditions in the south, more heat, less precipitation, while there's more moisture up in the Pacific Northwest. That pattern is already showing hints in current trends, and like I said, we're just in that really weird in-between phase. So not only are we shifting season into fall, we are also shifting the oscillation phase. So the weather is really odd right now. Real quick, I'll go ahead and walk you through the forecast models and what conditions are going to look like in the Ark La Tex region. You can see that's a pretty congealed mess of storms there associated with a low pressure system and the trough that moves in. Over the past 2 weeks, we've been observing this pattern that the models have been expected with this trough. And we just weren't certain exactly how it was going to play out, just like with a lot of these things well in advance. The unfortunate thing is that it's not really going to bring a lot of cool weather like these systems usually do, because we still have such warm weather and high pressure system influence. You can see the cold air that blasts through with this event is only going to be very brief and will only accompany the event. It will be pretty subsident. Now we're going to have a round of increment fronts moving in that have a pretty hard time battling that high pressure and the heat wave that is pretty much looking like it's not going to leave us anytime soon. It looks like right around Halloween, the east could see an ejection of cold air, which might make it pretty nice going into November, but this is further out, and this will probably just change like the current event that we're dealing with as we get closer to it. Your model's pretty similar. That's the event we're about to experience, and then this right here is later on in October, and it actually is a little bit more conservative. But it does show that temperatures want to be a bit cooler further west, which if I'm cheering for your model here because I live here. So when it comes to the severe event this weekend through the 18th to 20th, the Euro model deems it less intense. The Euro model actually thinks it'll get more intense as it moves further east out of that area where it's expected to possibly produce tornadoes. This could be a pretty considerable squall line here, so I just want to keep an eye on that. But I want to highlight this is you need to keep an eye on this because it could turn bad, worse than we think. I wouldn't set in stone and say for certain you can expect tornadoes in this region. If you do, maybe a couple, but just good to keep an eye on as forecasts change. I am a decent bit concerned about it. Looking at a broader picture here with upper level dynamics, you can see that event that's forecast to unfold there, that trough moves over Arkansas. And then following that, we pretty much just have a series of similar events happening, and it kind of looks like we have almost an omega pattern setup going on, especially about after that, and the next pattern comes in about right here. It's not particularly dominant, but this kind of pattern will allow for moisture to get pulled up into the plains, although if that high pressure system there does do its thing, it could probably help to funnel out a lot of that. Actually, no, the direction of air on the surface because of that high pressure system will actually allow for moisture to be dug up into the plains, so that could cause some more severe weather later on the 22nd and onward. So it's just going to be really intermittent and a lot of stuff going on, but This you see here, this pretty violent movement of air in the upper atmosphere, is probably going to fuel a lot of storms in the Pacific Northwest. And this is kind of classic for La Nina as we start moving into that. A lot of this just stays suspended north rather than influencing much of the southern U.S. The last thing I want to show you in this video involves the tropics, which have been still awfully quiet, unusually quiet this year. But both models over the past few days have been consistently agreeing that there is some storm that is going to form in the Caribbean and likely move out into the ocean, but those trends could shift. This is really far out, so the likelihood of this event here earlier happening is becoming more likely, and the uncertainty as to where exactly it goes by the time whatever is likely at this point going to form is pretty great. This is what the Euro model is showing, and it actually takes it over the Yucatan. Actually, before it was taking over the Yucatan, now it wants to drag it further out east and take it over Cuba as an intense hurricane. Really far out, so just keep an eye on this as this plays out. People on the Gulf Coast especially want to be weary because, like I said, with the uncertainty further out, this could end up, just any of these storms can end up being a U.S. impact further down the line. We just don't know for certain, but nothing to panic over right now. In fact, don't panic, just be prepared. So that's everything for today. I will continue to update you as we get further through this, and the next two videos I have will focus on La Nina and what that means, as well as what that means to the rest of hurricane season. Remember to stay safe out there, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you are the storm. If this does unfold the way that it does, I might actually just go up to Arkansas on storm chase, maybe, possibly. What better way to spend my birthday than watching the sky remind us that even during transition, storms always find their rhythm. If I die on my birthday to a storm, that would actually be pretty epic, but I don't intend to. I don't want to. I make myself sound so bad with these. I just need to shut up.